Welcome to the Leadmore podcast. I'm your host, John T. Meyer. The Leadmore podcast is the show where we sit down and talk with leaders of today to help inspire the leaders of tomorrow. Because I believe the world needs more leaders, and you should be the next one. In episode 18 here, we sat down with my friend, Brett Hagler. Brett is the CEO and co-founder of New Story Charity, and they are working to tackle one of the world's largest problems. How do we make sure everyone in the world has safe, affordable, clean housing? And New Story is doing some incredible stuff to help do that. And along the way, they're really inventing, reinventing, and innovating on what charity should look like. We talked about how you tackle big problems. Brett gave such great advice on why you need to be bold, think differently, and set yourself apart from the competition. And you're just going to hear how Brett thinks about how he leads his team in terms of their core values and the things that they push in terms of what they value and what they try to build and drive every day in their organization. I loved catching up with my buddy Brett. His story is so compelling and interesting, and what they've accomplished in just 5 years is incredible. So I know you're going to enjoy this conversation. Let's go take a listen. All right, here we are on the Leadmore podcast. I'm here with my buddy, Brett Hagler, the CEO and founder of New Story. How are you, Brett?
I'm doing well, my friend. Good to be on with you.
Yeah, it's been a wild, crazy time. I saw you in November of 19 when you guys were doing your, I can't remember the name of the event, the big charity gala.
Yeah.
And
you
guys raised
in San Francisco,
$1 million
like the ferry. Yeah, it was at the Ferry building. It was beautiful. We thought we had all these massive plans for 2020. We couldn't have more momentum. And then I went on a sabbatical and I came back to COVID. So
you did the sabbatical at the start of the year, right?
Yeah.
Oh man.
That's right.
Yeah. You were armed for ideas, but maybe not the ones you thought you'd have to come up with. So
it's funny. It's like some of them actually, because I did try to, zoom out like 3-5 years and stuff. And a lot of those ideas that I wrote down just became more actionable to do this year, just because obviously things change. So It was very interesting, both on a personal level to, prepare yourself just psychologically, mentally, spiritually, all the things for COVID. And then it was interesting from a business standpoint too.
Yeah, I bet. Well, you're a leader I admire and someone that I've known for, it feels like a long time in kind of internet days. So we met in the spring of 2015. I figured out, I would try to do the math backwards. Yeah. We were both in Nashville, Tennessee, attending Donald Miller's Story Brand workshop.
That's right.
And in the spring of 15, you guys must have been 2 or 3 months old. When did you start New Story?
Dude, we literally were like, 3 months old. And I knew I wanted brand and storytelling, and I just knew the importance of it and marketing. And so I remember basically getting that trip to Story Brand sponsored by a donor. And I was so excited to get things kicked off, because it was just me at that point. And I was on the side of a job I was doing. We go so far back into the very beginning of New Story. And I think it's cool that, just putting yourself in those positions, you can manufacture serendipity, right? So I met you, I met a couple other folks, obviously learned a lot from Don Miller and their team, but you got to put yourself in those positions. So it's really cool how we met there and still friends.
Yeah, just sitting next to each other, which is so crazy. And then that summer I gave up my 30th birthday, which I think was one of the first.
Yep.
And so we got to, we can spend hours just catching up, but we got to tell the listeners, tell us about what New Story does. You're tackling a really giant problem. So give us the elevator pitch.
Yeah. We're trying to tackle really one of the world's biggest problems and most expensive problems too. So there are today a little more than 1 billion people that don't have adequate shelter. And, that's a huge number, obviously, but it's also a very expensive number, because I would assume for most of the listeners, the biggest line item in your budget is usually going to be, around your rent or your house or your mortgage, right? It's the same with anybody, especially families in poverty. And so it's also one of the most expensive problems in the world. And so, that is, it can somewhat be overwhelming how big it is, and can, I think, paralyze people as well, because it's the problem's so big, what can you do? And so how we got started, the mantra that I say a lot is, try to do for one what you wish you could do for all. And I say that because you could get so overwhelmed by a problem that you're like, oh, will this actually make a difference? Like, will this actually do anything? And it's like, okay, if you're going to really go by the numbers, sure, it could be a tiny, 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 tiny percentage. But at the same time, it could change the world for a family or a community. And that's actually a really big deal to them, right? So trying not to get, answering your question of like, starting with a problem so big, don't get paralyzed by how big it is. Like, just start and try to do for one family what you wish you could do for a billion families. And then we also say to dream big, but to start small. And so that's how I got started. I mean, I was just after my 25th birthday, I went on a trip to Haiti a couple years after the 2010 earthquake.
Yeah.
Yep. And families just had their homes destroyed, and they were given temporary tarp tents that, is better than being outside under the stars with your kids. But it's not that much better. And, those tents were fine for a couple months after a crisis, right? But today it's literally been over 10 years and families are still living in those tents. And then you just run into like this problem of not having life's most basic human needs. I mean, when you don't have safety or shelter or clean water, you can't do anything. You're just in what we call survival mode, right? That's why I'm sure everybody's heard of, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like, doesn't matter how intelligent, how creative, how hardworking, like all the things, you have to have the basics in order to start actualizing your potential. And so I saw it firsthand of families that didn't, of little kids that didn't, not because it was something that they deserved. It just happened. And I kind of realized that in my own life, I did nothing to deserve where I was born. I was like literally one of the luckiest human beings in human history of just where I was born. I wasn't born into like necessarily an extremely wealthy family, but like relative, it was, the best position in the world. And it just hit me that like, I was so lucky. I had been given so much I didn't deserve. And it would be really cool to try to direct some of my talent and ambition to help others. And so that's how New Story started. And we started with just like super unqualified, no experience, no real money to really get us kicked off. Like, I had a couple people in my network, but like it wasn't some, awesome network that I had that like kickstarted this thing. It was not really, it was just a drive to start it. But also what was super important was it was trying to take a totally different angle on building a charity or a social impact organization. And that was really what we tripled down on from a messaging standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, was we knew all these things, or I felt all these like more traditional kind of old school frustrations with charity. And we wanted to be the opposite of that. And that's actually why it's called New Story. Was we wanted to create obviously a new story in people's lives and communities, but also a new story in how we think about social impact and how we think about charity. And I knew from my experience when I was young at 20, I'm still kind of young, but like when I was 24, 25 and, was very entrepreneurial, love the startup world. When I heard the word charity, the first words that came to my mind weren't necessarily innovative, forward thinking, it just
good
wasn't.
Design.
And
all that.
All of it. Great talent, right? Like it wasn't. And it's like, what if it could be like that? And that was really what got me super excited and what I felt and why I felt it justified starting an organization instead of just joining one. So that's how we got started. And what we do, sorry, listeners, I haven't really said what we do, but
no, you're good.
We pioneer solutions to end global homelessness. And so what that means is we try to find more modern or different ways to design and build housing and communities of homes. And we work in Haiti, El Salvador, and Mexico. And the homes that we design and build for families are mostly in extreme poverty. The homes are anywhere from the low end, like $6,000 to the high end, $12,000 for a built to last home. And so that's what we do.
I wanted to ask you about you mentioned the word unqualified, and not in a bad way, but like in those early days when you're sitting there, you have a blank canvas. You're like, what do I do today? Day 2 of my company. yeah, you're not a builder. You're not a real estate guy by trade. You're like, how did you get through those moments of like, I should not be doing this? And how did you stay committed to the idea?
Oh, for sure. I mean, one thing was I knew where I needed help, right? So it's kind of an obvious answer, but I knew what I needed help with, and I tried to go find those early team members, which ended up becoming my co-founders and pretty much my brother and sister today, Matthew and Alexandria. So that was the first thing, and then the second thing was like I knew that what we were trying to do. The biggest differentiator was that we were going to try to disrupt a lot of the traditional system. And we were just going to come at things with a totally different angle, with a different narrative. And I knew that. And I knew that was the thing, like that approach, that was what was rare or scarce, right? What's not rare or scarce is then finding somebody that you can pay that has experience like in construction, right? Like, sure. You can do that, right? Like if you wanted to start a venture capital fund, like you could find somebody that has looked at deals before and knows how to do finance, right? Yeah. What is more scarce is what's your network, what is your really rare advantage. And I felt like we had that. And so I was like, let's just get started. And then we can, pick up important people along the way that actually know what they're doing. And so
sure,
that makes sense. Started.
And then I'm sure a big pivotal moment, obviously, in your story, and I think it had just happened when we met in that spring, was you got accepted into Y Combinator, and one of the first nonprofits to do it. And I remember you were saying at the time, like, we think we were going to try to do like 10 or 20 homes by the end of the year. And they told you in the application, like, no, make it 100. I think it was something like that. I just remember the story. Like it was like thinking so big, right? To almost feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. It's a story that's part of our DNA, and has actually become a value at News Story that we call Think Big, Break Down, Execute. So the short version of it is, after we got into Y Combinator, which was just, I mean, that was the thing that really kind of accelerated our growth. And I could tell the story of how we got in later if you want. But once you got in, they made you pick one metric at the end of the basically 100 days that you were going to fight like hell to make happen. And it just had to be one metric. And they said, it needs to be really ambitious. So you guys go put your heads down, figure out what seems like nearly impossible, but maybe you could do it. And we came back to their partners and said, okay, we're going to try to do 50 houses, which to us was a lot, like inconceivable. And they said, okay, awesome. Just double that. And you're going to aim for 100. And it's so cool because it just totally reframes what we would have to do in order to do that, right? So when you set a bigger goal, then when you reverse engineer and you plan of how to hit that goal, I'm now having to talk to different people. I'm now having to cold email different people, right? I'm having to email certain folks and make, a $500,000 ask instead of a $5,000 ask, right? And it's neat because the same amount of time you're spending, it's just what are you spending it on? And I think when you go after bigger goals, it forces you to think differently and think bigger. And I think that's rare. I think being bold is rare, and bold ideas attract bold people. And we figured that out early. We just went way bolder with our goals and our ambitions, and that attracted people that were like that.
Yeah, and it seems, whether it was from YC or if that's something that you already had in your DNA, I can tell that it stuck with you because you set really big visions for News Story. Like even that gala night, right? We're going to raise, I don't know, $1 million, and then you did, right? Mm-hmm. So that's cool.
Yeah, I think that's something for leaders, like something like that. It doesn't require. Again, I have this like theme I keep saying of do things that are scarce and are rare, right? Everybody can set like seemingly reachable goals and like normal goals. But when you start to be bolder, you attract a totally different kind of person, right? Because you're setting yourself apart from what everybody else is either going to ask for. It's just different. And like not that many people do it. And so you don't need to have some fancy resume or an MBA from Harvard or Stanford. Like just be bold. And that is going to be a differentiator for you because not that many people are bold.
Yeah, I love that. That's really good.
And you could choose to do that. Like just decide to do it.
Yeah. today. It costs you nothing, right? It's just
That's right.
your belief. Yeah. Well, you mentioned a couple values already. I know we've learned that on this show that leaders are often driven by core values, first principles, whatever you want to call them. I know a few of yours. Talk us through those, because I know you guys really stick to them. Being a founder mentality. Let's talk about those.
Yeah, I'll talk about two of them. So I kind of have favorites with values. So
Sure.
We have 5, but I have 2 favorites that I think we've really built the organization on, and especially hiring. And so the first one is what we call a humble pursuit of excellence. And this one to me is kind of the magic or the sweet spot of what a leader should be. So this comes from Jim Collins' Level 5 leadership, which I'm sure some folks are familiar with. And it's just really, really rare dichotomy of a leader on one hand that is super ambitious, that is very driven, tenacious, is going to, move quick, like all the things you'd think about, right? And they're also incredibly humble, selfless, compassionate. Usually, companies and leaders usually skew to one of those ways, right? You're either like super driven, tenacious, or you're like incredibly kind and like humble. And what's hard to find is the middle of those. Yeah. And so when you can be, tenacious and humble, that is a really unique blend that we think creates magic in a culture and leaders. And so that's kind of our number one value. And then as an organization, you can do that too, because you can, as an organization, you can strive for excellence. You can have a really high standard, but you also need to always be humble in that pursuit. You need to be learning, and you need to, not come off that you're trying to sound better than others, right? And so it's a really rare blend, and that's kind of the main value that we work on.
Cool. That's great. And then I think you have one about like a founder mentality, right?
Or all
founders. I'm curious about that.
Yeah. So the other one is, we call it a team of founders. And the way I describe it is, it's just, we don't use the word employee at News Story. The E word is just like kind of banned. We don't say it because we really just want people to be part of the bigger picture and the bigger vision of growing the organization, right? And we want them to look back, 10 years from now, when they've probably moved on, or they're at another company, or they've started a company or whatever, and they want to look back and say like, wow, I really helped build that organization. And I wasn't just looking out to do my role to the best of my ability, but I was looking across the organization, and I was trying to find ways to make all of it better, right? And I was trying to help other departments. If somebody was giving, a keynote, I wasn't just sitting and listening. I was thinking like, oh, how could a visual be better? Or how could we change a slide, right? Like it's just that mindset where you want everything to improve and get better. And then you're raising your hand to take action to do that. And that's the kind of culture we've tried to cultivate. And, I said this before, but that's a total choice that anybody can make. And it's really neat when you see team members adopt that mentality because it's really special to building an organization.
So this might be more tactical, but I've known you guys when you're just the 3 co-founders, and now I don't know, over 30 employees, 40. How do you hire for something like that? How do you decipher if somebody has that team of founder mentality, or is it just learned?
Yeah, it's a really good question. We definitely have a pretty intensive interview process, but we'll try to first, of course, go off of their experience and like probing for that question, like what have they done before this that showed a more of an owner mentality of taking on more than their actual job role, of taking initiatives on certain projects, of trying to start their own things, whether it's on the side or not. And so we try to get at that mentality there, and then questions during the interview process that are really geared towards how they would handle situations at the company.
Okay, cool. Well, maybe the answer here is what you said earlier about being scarce and being rare and bold. But I wanted to ask you how do you attract opportunities and people to news story? Because I think that's one thing you guys have done incredibly well, right? So like Apple came to you and said, let's do a documentary. And you have some really impressive board members and investors, whether it be, Jen Rubio, CEO of Away, or who am I forgetting? Reddit.
Alexis
Ohanian. Yeah. So like, I know that you're on that humble spectrum too. So like people come to you and they want to be involved. How do you make it such a contagious thing?
It's a good question. Well, the first thing is that momentum definitely begets momentum, right? So I think we've done a good job of like when you get some kind of win, it's like how do you leverage that to get the most out of it while it's happening? So, the first one we got was getting into Y Combinator, right? And so what did I do? I said, I'm going to email every single venture capitalist and I'm going to put Y Combinator in the subject line. And I know they're going to open the email because it says Y Combinator, and I'm going to try to get them on the phone for 10 minutes. And they're going to be like, you're a nonprofit going through Y Combinator? Like, that's what? I'm like, yeah, exactly. Let me tell you why. And so, it's like using that momentum to then get a couple very credible venture capitalists on board. One of our first has been just an awesome supporter ever since, like a gentleman by the name of Brad Feld from Foundry Group.
Sure. Yeah,
and
Brad's great.
He was one of the first guys that took a chance on us. And he felt how passionate we were, how committed we were, how high of a standard of excellence we had for impact. And, that led to a referral or a blog post. And, it kind of built on that. So then I was like, okay, well, Brad's involved. So I'm going to tell a couple of their venture capital folks or people in tech who's all involved. And so you build on that momentum. And then you have to keep doing bold things, right? So Apple cold emailed us about shooting a documentary on Apple TV. But why do they do that? Because we made a courageous, risky choice to try 3D printing houses when everybody else, not everybody, a lot of people told us, hey, don't do that yet. Wait until later, let other companies figure it out first.
Sure.
Then you can do it. Too risky. Just use that R&D money to, so we ended up deciding like, okay, if we have X amount of money to do 3D printing housing R&D project, should we try it on that, which is super high risk, or should we just build another 20 houses? And so many people told us like, dude, what are you doing? Like just build 20 homes. Like, it works. But to us, it's like that's so normal, and normal doesn't create the kind of breakthroughs that we need. So we decided to do that, and then it worked. And then, everybody thought it was cool and wanted to get on board, but it's like,
sure.
And we've had a lot of press, and we've had, with our partner Icon, I think now well over 500 million video views, like all types of, like couple thousand media outlets. Like it's been this huge lightning strike, but it's because we made a bold, courageous choice. And you just continue to build on that momentum.
And layer on top. Yeah,
the other way that I think is really important for us is we've done a good job of really like cultivating and like strengthening relationships along the way. Because, at the end of the day, like, yes, you need to make those bold choices, but you also need to have relationships and a network that believe in you and want to keep supporting whatever you're working on. And that could be from a mentor perspective, that could be as a customer, right? That could be obviously for us, donors or supporters. But it's being really intentional about strengthening those relationships.
Yep. So you guys have pretty effectively, I would say, blurred the lines between this nonprofit and like a high-tech startup. I mean, in many ways, you run it like a high-tech startup. Mm-hmm. So the difference, though, instead of selling a widget or software, is you're actually selling or trying to get donors. So how do you is it any different in your mind, or is the playbook differently since you're trying to get supporters and people to write a check?
Yeah. I think there's definitely differences, but I would like to think that more than 80% of it is the same, right? I think that you want the same kind of talent, culture, standard of excellence, like everything. Like we very much will, look at our peers that are doing really well and think like, how can we be like that? How can we be like them? And oftentimes a lot of our peers are not other nonprofits, but are other really good startups our age that have had just a great first, 3, 4, 5 years. And that's who we're, trying to learn from or trying to be like. And so, or trying to create an environment where those kind of people would want to come work for us. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think so much of that is the same. With the biggest difference is with philanthropy, you really do need to, you need to prioritize inspiring people and truly showing that they're making an impact, right? Because you're not necessarily selling a product that solves a problem or pain point for them. So that's probably
you have to connect. Yeah,
that's probably the biggest difference. Is your what you're selling is a little bit different, but we're also now getting into business, probably a separate conversation, but we're trying to figure out other ways to grow our revenue or donations that is not just philanthropic donations, but creating a software product that we could actually sell into like the nonprofit market and like a SaaS business that kind of fits within News Story, but as a revenue generating engine. So we're exploring different things right now, but yeah, I think mostly it's the same. You have to be even better at inspiring and really storytelling.
Yeah, cool. That makes sense. So on that bold spectrum, I think you're always a very cool, calm leader, and you seem to make these bold moves and do so pretty confidently. So what scares you about building News Story?
Honestly, I think now we're maturing a little bit. We're heading into our 6th year, and I think you got to be really focused and intentional about perpetually having this, more bold culture or bold decision making, right? Because it's easier now when you do have some momentum or some success or more people that you need to be responsible for, to somewhat let off the gas
ease up a little bit.
Yep. And there's some truth in that, right? I mean, you need to be smart, and you need to be wise. But I always say, like, we call it the genius of the and, where you should be bold and smart. It doesn't have to be bold or smart, right? And I think leaders, when they figure that out, that it's almost everything is a dichotomy that you need to balance well, and it doesn't have to be one or the other. And so we're trying to learn that now. And I hope, actually, one of my biggest fears is that we don't lean away too far from the creativity and the innovation and the boldness and the ingenuity that kind of got us to where we are.
Yeah, that's important to just constantly push on that. That's good. Well, you prove one of the points of this show, which is that leaders come kind of in all shapes and sizes, and sometimes unexpectedly. You're younger than me, and I feel like I learn about leadership from you. So
I don't know about that.
When you talk about how crazy 2020 has been, I think pretty early on in COVID, you posted, I think it was a link to a Google Doc, which was a letter you maybe wrote to your team. So it was an internal memo, but you shared it. Tell me a little bit about that, because I thought it was really fascinating, kind of reframing this crazy opportunity. And because to think about COVID and opportunity is sort of a dichotomy, but you framed it that way. So talk about that letter you wrote your team.
Yeah. I mean, so for News Story, when we started the organization, I mean, it's been a pretty much a bull market ever since, and really pretty much every aspect. And so while we've had a great start, and I'm really proud of the team, we have done it in a very advantageous time, right?
Sure.
And so coming into this, we knew this was going to be our first really longer sustained test when it came to adversity. And it's not to say we haven't gone through things before. Of course we have, but this is definitely the biggest thing. And so the way I saw it, I was like, okay, I know we're going to make it through, right? Fortunately, we were in a place cash wise, and it wasn't like, is this going to be the end of the organization or not? Which some people, depending on what kind of business they're in, that's a totally separate, issue to solve for. So for me, I'm like, okay, I know we're going to come out of this, and I cared a little less about our numbers for the year, which is hard for me because I'm very goal oriented, kind of guy and leader. Cared more about some of those things that I just knew, and obviously COVID's now, we have more clarity on it 6 months fast forwarded, but there's so many things that I knew that we couldn't control, right? Like we couldn't control how donors were going to react to this, how corporate sponsors were going to react. We could try our best, but like at the end of the day, like this is such a, an anomaly. Like they're going to react how they're going to react. We couldn't control when travel came back. We couldn't control when construction came. So many things are out of our control. But the one thing we could control is our character during this time, and where are we strengthening our character? And in Q2, which was April through May or June, I said our number one company goal is are we going to strengthen our character, and we were going to try to measure that in certain ways, because that's the one thing that we did have control over, and I just thought like, okay, if we all collectively, if we individually strengthen our character, that's going to strengthen our team, and when we come out of this, this is like no BS. Like I really thought we'd be in a much better place for the next couple of years because we'd just be that much stronger as a team. And so that was our stance, and I feel really good about how the team has responded and the position we're in today. But
yeah, I think
that was the take on it.
That's just great leadership and bold, and it seems like it worked. I mean, I don't know, in a market where you guys are doing construction and international markets, probably COVID isn't very helpful, but I know you're still hiring. So like you're like the time you guys are like trudging through and still chasing those goals and dreams.
Yeah. We've ended up having a really creative and exciting year for sure, with some big goals left to do still in 2020. But I'm super proud of just the team's response and their choices and the way they've strengthened their character.
And one of those, and then we'll finish with some rapid fire, but maybe this was one of those ideas you got on that sabbatical, but I don't know if it's a pivot or just an addition you guys added. Talk about, was it the Founders Lab that you called it? That social entrepreneurship accelerator. Would that be the right word?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we've now done 3 pretty different pivots. I'm going to call pivots. Just we've had our hands tied a little bit with the pauses during our international work, which is coming back now. So we're shifting focus back. But the first thing we did was, for the first time, we did a U.S. project that was more so about preventing homelessness. So how do we help families that have lost their income during COVID to also not lose their homes? And we started a program to simply just help pay their rent or their mortgage, which went really well. We've now decided just to sunset the program because we want to get back to focus on our international communities. But that was an awesome, couple months that really rallied the team, where we felt like it was still under the banner of our overall mission. Obviously it's a little different, but that was a really great decision that we made to do that. And then also we were like, we've always had a desire to kind of take what has made News Story different and unique and try to turn it inside out so that we could show others what it's actually been like. And so we said, hey, it's actually really interesting time to create some online content. And a lot of people that had college, internship plans or grad school plans, or the more people are at home with more time. And so we pretty quickly stood up an online 5-week accelerator for people that are interested in social entrepreneurship. And it actually was a really great first cohort. And we're doing a second one coming up here in October. So
that's awesome.
And that's something now that will probably become its own program inside of News Story, and will have its own team that runs it, and will be actually a really strong revenue generator for News Story. So because people pay to go through the program, and
sure.
And we're just teaching content. Like we're just really taking things, turning it inside out, using our network to come on as guest teachers and mentors. So that's been awesome. And then the last thing is that we've still like super early, but there's a new venture capital fund that's being created that's focused on our mission, which is housing innovation. So how do we find more startups that are taking bigger, bolder swings at lowering the cost of housing and increasing the speed of housing and construction? So that's all happened in 6 months, while at the same time, definitely delivering on whatever we could for our mission, our impact in the international communities that we work in.
Yeah, that's awesome, Brett. I mean, great work. And I think to frame the challenge that you guys are tackling on the website, it read, and I don't know what we're estimating in terms of global population in 2050, but
Yeah.
estimated 3 billion people in the world will not have adequate housing by 2050.
Yes. Yeah. It's kind of what I was mentioning in the beginning of our time together. It's, I think it's going to be one of the biggest, I think it already is, but I think it's going to increasingly become one of the biggest problems in the world. It's so expensive. Housing, when you're in extreme poverty, or even if you're lower income or even middle income, I mean, right? Like it's just expensive. And we just feel that you have to take swings of doing it differently and trying to pioneer different solutions. And that doesn't just have to be with how you actually build the homes, which is obviously 3D printing homes is exciting and it's shiny and we get that and we love it, but also like more creative or innovative ways to offer financing or loans for families in extreme poverty, right? And like, how can we think about, if they don't have an asset to put up for collateral, like, can we try to create a new way to fund collateral for, like, just you have to think about it differently, or else it's just hard to conceive that you're going to make a sizable dent in that growing problem unless we're really rethinking the systems and the innovation for housing.
Yeah, the problem is
that's
growing.
That's what we're going all in on. Yeah.
Yeah, the problem's growing and our traditional solutions aren't working, right? So yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And like, we know obviously as one organization, like, you know, I'm a big thinker, big dreamer, but like one organization isn't going to solve that problem. Right. So how do you think about it strategically to where you can try to make as big of a dent as you can? And for us, what we're doing is we want to come up with these innovations and prove that they're possible. And then we don't want to keep them for ourselves. The best thing we can do is kind of democratize them or export them and have other private builders for affordable housing, other government agencies, nonprofits, like we want others to adopt what we're doing because that ultimately would be such a bigger impact than us just trying to do it all ourselves.
Yeah. Well, and that, like the Founders Lab makes me think of, I always love the sawdust analogy, right? Like the carpenter, you guys are building new story, but along the way, you have this sawdust that now you're like, wait a minute, what can we do with this? And you put together this program, drives revenue. I'm sure that's going to be a great
I haven't heard of that before. That's good.
Great. Yeah, because
sawdust, I'm going to use that. That's good.
Yeah, it's just what's left on the floor, but you can monetize that. And I'm sure that program is going to be a good feeder of talent. Who knows nonprofits those people will start.
It's actually
It'll build
super exciting. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just think even like not everyone needs to be a New Story employee. Like I just feel like myself as like a New Story cheerleader, right? Like I want to talk about it and spread it and tell people about it. So go ahead.
Yeah, with that Founders Lab example, which is the 1 month accelerator, it's a hiring pipeline and it's also a diversity pipeline for us, which is super important long term. And I'll be honest, it's not something that's a quick fix, and so we're trying to take or quicker improvement that we want to have, and so we're trying to take a longer term approach. And we're like, well, this could be a great way to get some awesome younger talent. And so there's so many different ways that you could use the sawdust. And what I also think is really cool about sawdust example is if you're listening and you're not like running your own company and you're a rising leader or you're an emerging leader in an organization, you could take some of that sawdust and like really grow it inside of the company, or maybe even spin it out, right? So it's like, what can you grab onto as a program, and just think of it of like, you're going to grow this program or this initiative, and it's up to you as far as how it grows.
Yeah, that's such a perfect tenet of Leadmore, which is like there are leaders within organizations who need to lead projects, initiatives, programs. You're right. All right. Well, I'll end us up on time here. So let's finish with some rapid fire. I know we sometimes play tag on Twitter with different books that we're reading. So I know you're a reader. What's a book you're reading right now?
Our DMs are full of Twitter. Full of Audible
book recommendations. Yeah. So what's maybe the best read of the year? What's one you recommend?
Oh, the best read of the year. Gosh. I went back and I did two of them. I did The Obstacle is the Way, which is by Ryan Holiday.
Yep, that one's so good.
Which is just timely for this season that we're all in. And then a new one that has actually been actually this one's brand new, but I really like it, is No Rules by Reed Hastings from Netflix.
Yep. I saw that just came out. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that would be one of my favorites for the year so far.
Cool. So 2020 has been stressful. Mental health is important. How do you unplug?
Yeah.
How do you de-stress?
Yeah, it's one, I was used to traveling a good amount, on a lot of planes, building the organization, but I think I've taken now 2 flights, since March. And so it's cut back on a lot of time, and I've actually had more time, than usual. And so I've tried to be a little bit more intentional on, getting outside, going certain places on the weekends. I fortunately now have an incredible girlfriend that is new and been amazing.
Cool.
And I'm closer to my parents, so I try to spend more time with them. Yeah. And then for me, like my faith's really important to me. And this has also been just a good time to kind of focus on that.
Yeah, that's great. We asked this question when we hire at Lemonly. What's your superpower? The one thing you do better than anybody?
Oh, man.
Which on that humble scale, it's tough. It makes you brag about yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the one thing which I've talked about a good amount during the podcast, I just kind of figured out at a young age that if you really have the courage to just do things differently, and take bold moves, it's mind-boggling to me how many people don't do that, and how so many people are scared of that. They over-index on the downside of everything, and I don't think people pay enough attention to the upside of things. And so, if anything, my superpower has been like going after things that others aren't willing to go after, and probably working just as hard as they would, if not more.
Sure.
So, definitely a lot of just hard work in that pursuit.
That's great. I love that message.
Yeah.
And then lastly, who are the mentors or leaders that inspire you, whether it be by book or loved ones that mentors? Talk about some of those folks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one is really like it's interesting. It's my best friend. So there's a peer, I think there's like a peer mentoring component to it. And I think that I think more people should do that, because while yes, it's amazing to have more experienced folks that are out ahead of you, and you should do, especially if you're a younger leader listening to this, like you just need to be intentional and do as much as you can to build those relationships and learn from them. But I also think having a few peers that are going to push you and are going to make you better, and then are just by being around them and being vulnerable and talking about things, and not trying to, have it seem like you have it all figured out, and, you're comparing yourself against them and you're doing better, or your numbers are this, or like, just be vulnerable and be real around people that are going to sharpen you. That's been, man, like my last couple of years, I've tried to double down on that, and I've gotten a lot of growth of just my peers that I really respect. So that would be my advice. Yeah,
that's great. All right. Well, this was awesome. Brett, tell us if somebody wants to follow you or follow New Story, get involved, maybe even donate. How should we connect to New Story?
Sure. You can just Google New Story and we pop up. You can learn more about the organization there. And then I'm pretty active on Twitter and Instagram, and it's just my name, Brett Hagler.
All right. Well, this is great to catch up. It's so good to hear from you and hear some of your lessons. Keep doing, you're inspiring guys. So keep up the good work.
All right, my friend. We'll have you on our Founders Lab podcast when we get that up and running. Thank you.
That sounds good. Take care, buddy. All right, that was episode 18 with Brett Hagler, the CEO and co-founder of New Story. Are you inspired? Right? I love the way Brett thinks so big and so bold, and he helps, really push me. I think it's important to have, mentors and advisors, people who have been there before in your life, but it's equally as important to have peers. And I view someone like Brett as a peer who really pushes me and makes me drive to achieve bigger things and think about and tackle big problems. So I hope you enjoyed that conversation here on the Leadmore podcast. We'll see you next week.